I would like to welcome you all to our panel and our conversation. I've been introduced a couple of times, so I think you know who I am. But let me point out that our panelists are going to be Brad Anderson at the end, who is the Executive Director of the Homer Chamber of Commerce and Visitor Center. In the middle, we're very pleased to have Catherine Alt, who is the co-owner with her husband of Inlet Charters, a small business here in the Homer area. She grew up here in Homer, 3 cheers for that, and has lived in Seattle and Fairbanks, and she worked for the South Peninsula Hospital as a certified nurse midwife. Also, we have at the end here is Rob Dumichel. I think that's close, right, Rob? Okay. Interesting last name. And he is the city manager of the city of Homer. What we plan to do for this lunchtime break is to be very informal, and it is a conversation. So we have several questions that we want to ask the panel, and then hopefully we will have time at the end so that you in the audience can also participate and give your comments on these kinds of subjects and questions. But first, I would like to ask each of you to briefly comment on what it is in your mind is the future for the community of Homer. And I'd like to start out first with Brad.
Future of Homer. From my perspective, I came up here, I moved up here in about 4.5 years ago. Fell in love with it about 5 years prior to that, so it took a while to get the path up here. So naturally, what attracted me is the sheer beauty of Homer and the resources that we naturally have around here. And since I've been up here, I've had a better appreciation of some of the challenges and things we have, but Homer has definitely been discovered. Obviously, because on the tourism side, we continue to grow year after year. I'm very thankful for that aspect of it. The fishing industry has always been a strong aspect. We're the halibut fishing capital of the world. And so we draw people constantly in for that. But from the chamber standpoint, one of the things that we are really concerned about is, having a lot of our eggs all in one basket. Those are 2 industries that have contributed greatly to our economy, the tax revenue base that comes out of that, but there are also industries that can change on us. There's outside factors that can limit the fishing side, how many days we can go out and how that industry goes. And the tourism side, we have the economics right now of inflation and everything else that creates more expense in trying to come up here. So our focus of the chamber is how we can diversify our economy here a little bit more and support some of those efforts. And what you heard about today in some of the discussions, I think there's been some good outside forces, some grants that have come forward. We have the expansion of the harbor, which is coming up. We're excited to see what that can be, but the mariculture side as well. Those are aspects that I think we can help support that will continue to provide some alternatives for us as well.
Great. Catherine, what about your thoughts about general future of the community of Homer?
I guess, moving back to Homer, one of the big reasons we moved back is because it still feels very much like the Homer that I grew up in. I think the best parts of Homer, like Brad said, is certainly the natural beauty that isn't going to change. But looking forward for my kids' futures and just the future of getting older here, I think we're going to have to change and we're going to have to progress. And I'm in the tourism business. Right now, it's feeling really good. I know there's inflation concerns, but over the past couple of summers, we've had some really good summers. The biggest concern for our business, though, is probably housing, because we have a really hard time hiring even seasonal workers without seasonal housing, or even year-round housing. So I would love to see some changes in that department, whether that's housing, and then that leads into childcare issues, which a lot of people are facing right now, including myself. And so I think we can get into those things further later on. But yeah, I'm excited for the change. I think there's a lot of possibility. I think Alaska, to me, sometimes Alaska feels actually like the last frontier, like you could do anything here. And I think our adaptability I think we can do it.
Great. Rob, what about you for your general ideas briefly about the future of the community of Homer?
Sure, thank you, Karen. So Homer's a big deal, and I think that's only going to intensify over time. We're a little city, but we act much larger than we are, and we're this really critical link to a lot of the rest of Alaska. And so I envision a community that's going to, we're going to face a lot of changes as we move forward, and we really need to just mindfully keep track of our community character. We want to make sure Homer stays Homer, but the way it looks is going to change. I definitely see us, densifying, reevaluating land use. We have a lot of talk about housing. The type of housing we build is probably going to change as we go. So really leaning into the fact that we're a young community and a young state, and we're teenagers. As far as like municipalities go, we're municipal teenagers, and we have a lot of room to grow and a lot of potential. And this time right now, I think, is really critical to getting the right vision, putting the right things in place, and making sure it's possible to build that home of the future. There's a lot of things we're going to do at a city level that are they're very foundational. Comp plans and zoning and things like that. Like, we're going to set the substrate, and the rest of you are going to plant seeds, and then it's going to grow.
Great. I think with that, we really should drill down on some very specifics. So let me ask this one question. Economy and its development is always a discussion point in these types of events. This means talking about production and consumption of goods and services. Tourism and fishing, as we've just stated, are giant industries here. So what would creating diversity do for our economy? How could it be created and keep Homer Homer? Catherine?
So like I said before, Homer, I think, will always be Homer. The biggest things that you're not going to change about Homer is the ocean and the mountains, and that'll forever be there. I think that we shouldn't necessarily shy away from change. I hear over and over, Homer is changing, and it isn't exactly the same as like when my in-laws were here in the 60s. I get that, but I think that, the future is progress. So I think that it would, I am not the expert at diversifying our economy by any means. I think, though, that, like Brad had said, to depend solely on fishing and tourism is probably a mistake. As my husband used to work up on the pipeline for a decade, and, oil is changing fast, too. I think, the whole state of Alaska is dealing with a lot of the same issues that Homer is. So I think that it would be great to maybe appeal to those remote workers or get tech involved. And, I know that there's a lot of controversy with that too. Tech has gone into some places and totally changed the face of those communities. But I think we have to kind of open up a little bit more and see how we can attract other types of workers.
Great, okay. Let's go with Rob next. Again, it's diversity and how it could be created and keep Homer Homer.
So I think one of the great things about Homer is that we are relatively diverse economically. You heard the mayor this morning say that we had 1,023 small businesses in Homer city limits. As a reminder, there are 5,900 people who live in Homer city limits. So that's really impressive. And so Homer is a town that people hustle. They have their jobs, they have their side jobs, they have their side hustles. And I think we have a lot of opportunity to embrace that entrepreneurial spirit and make sure that, as we continue to grow as a city, we're just offering opportunities for, entrepreneurialism to happen and to grow. So making sure that they have broadband, like we were talking about earlier, so they can connect to the rest of America, making sure we have the correct linkages to supply chains and travel, and all that really adds up to help make sure that, outside of our base, travel, tourism, fishing, we can grow these other things. And like was just mentioned earlier, you've got folks who can choose to live anywhere and do their job wherever they can get an internet connection. And my academic background is in natural resources, and we call those people amenity migrants. They want to go live somewhere beautiful and do their job and take it with them. So this is the kind of place that I think is really attractive to someone who wants that lifestyle. And so they can bring their job, bring their family, bring their dog, bring the whole thing up here, and help us diversify and bring that talent to town that maybe leads to new businesses or more medium-sized businesses that we can use to take Homer to that next level of economic development.
Great. Brad?
At the chamber, this past year, our board sat down at our annual retreat, and the primary focus was to update our overall strategic plan. We hadn't really sat down and updated that for about 5 years prior to that. So the outcome of that effort is really focus exactly what we're talking about here, focusing on our economic development issues, how we are going to change, what would that look like, and what can the chamber do to help support some of those efforts. And so attracting new businesses and new entrepreneurial opportunities, but also finding ways to make those connections to people who are growing up here and who have been, as they're looking for opportunities after the end of high school, how do we try to keep them and connect them where the local jobs are? And elsewise, who else in the state, veterans, anyone else that also has some skills who would love to stay in the state, what can we do to try to help provide some connectivity to training, to workshops to help create those opportunities for us. But we certainly do see the need to diversify what we have opportunities with here. Looking at our actual sales information, Homer really is in a great position that we certainly key in the summer months when the tourism kicks in, but it's been also encouraging to see outside of those other quarters, we're becoming more and more stabilized in where our revenue opportunities are coming from. So year-round employment opportunities also creates more resources for the residents here, and the more we can do to provide year-round jobs and create more resources for us will help improve our living opportunities too. So that's where our focus is.
Great. It seems to me from what I'm hearing from the panelists is that the Hummer community is quite open to all of this diversity, and that we have energy, and that we recognize what this might bring to us. It also is nice that it seems like you're feeling that Homer could still be Homer. But in all of this, we know growth is here, and we know that there's workforce concerns are a big part of it. And from my perspective, I think we still have time to act, to determine what kind of growth it will be. But what comes with that is several areas that are always at the top of the list that have already been mentioned, and that is housing, childcare, and transportation. That unless we provide certain aspects, people aren't going to come, they can't stay. So what I would like to do is let's take a look at each of these sections, housing to start, and I ask, what should we be talking about for some solutions when it comes to housing? And it looks like Brad is first up.
For the housing situation, in this past year especially, in talking to all of our chamber members, workforce housing was a gigantic factor in our ability to help, be open enough hours to deal with the travelers coming in here, a number of days and things. So I don't think there was a business that we talked to that wasn't experiencing or had someone they could have identified and hired as they found a place for them to live. So, we've been kind of talking about that, where are the solutions coming from? And I truly believe it's going to be an all-hands-on-deck kind of solution. It's going to be a private sector and public sector, combination of things. But for us on the workforce side, we are pretty fortunate right now, and I think we're one of the only regions in the state that we do have a project that's coming here to the community. One of our members, Anchor 907, I found some vacant or excess military housing units up at J-Bear, and approached the chamber and said, hey, do you think if we could get our hands on these, that this might make a difference in trying to put some housing together for the workforce side? And so we had some discussion back and forth, and they had a short time frame to get them off the base to be able to utilize them, so they made a commitment, found their own funding, and those units are coming down, I believe, last night. The first of them came down, and they're on the piece of property, and that's going to be being located right outside of town on Old Sterling and Sterling Highway. But that project will have, up to about 100 bedrooms that can be utilized for the workforce housing. So I feel good going into this next year that that is one piece. We have a solution coming into play for that, but I think the overall housing issue is going to be a continuing struggle to find solutions, and I'm sure you guys have a lot more factors, but it's complicated. When we were just trying to work with that company and trying to find where they could put a complex like that, just hurdle after hurdle after hurdle came up until they finally found something that they could just purchase outright and then try to make that all happen. But no, it's an issue for certainly.
Right. Catherine, any thoughts on solutions for housing? What needs to be done, or how to do it, or what?
Yeah, housing's tough. Like I had said before, it's really hard to find housing for our seasonal workers, and I'm sure for long-term workers as well. But so this is controversial, but I think that it would be not a bad idea to put some sort of restrictions on the number of Airbnbs in the city, in the boroughs. And a lot of us don't even live in city limits. It would be great to see that. Currently, I think, like Brad had said, a private solution too. So like my husband and I, we are building a garage with an apartment up top on our property just so we can house some of our deckhands. And that's a private solution, and I feel like we're lucky enough to be able to afford that, but it would be nice to see something coming from the public too. Airbnbs can be amazing, and they can be really helpful. I know we have a lot of tourists, like we're trying to talk about tourism here and get more people up. So it's a balance, but you also can't have everybody buying up second, third, fourth homes and turning them into Airbnbs that are just for seasonal use, because then the people who are coming to Homer for, all of the restaurants and the charter businesses, there's just no place for workers. And then affordability is a whole separate issue, making, the whole world is getting more expensive, so how do we make this more affordable, especially for seasonal workers, but especially also for the long-term people who are going to be here throughout the winter. And I wish I had a good solution to that.
I think everybody wishes we had a good solution to that. Rob?
Definitely a topic that I spend a lot of time thinking about, and this is on our list at the city. The Homer City Council, they do where we did a visioning in 2022, and one of the top items there was housing challenges. What do we do? And just as an employer, the city, we're probably in the top 4 employers in town, and one of the biggest hurdles I have is where are people going to live? So it's not just the small businesses, it's not just the seasonal businesses. It's I need to hire a firefighter, and I get applications from all over the country, and we'll make job offers, and then people get a little deeper into figuring out how to live here, and they bail out. So we see that all the time when we're attempting to hire talent. But earlier Brad touched on it. You need a public part and you need a private part of this. And so the good news, for people who really enjoy public process and public engagement, the city, we are getting ready to embark on a update of our comprehensive plan. And so that's, if you're not familiar with planning, that's the comprehensive document that really leads a lot of things in the city as far as like what we're about. How are we going to develop? What's our land use going to look like? What do we want to see ourselves as 20 years out? So that paired with the zoning code, which gets a little more specific, which is what can you actually do on a piece of property. We're working that into that larger project to make sure that once we do I like to say like the comp plan is like all smiles and high fives. It's vision and stuff you're excited about and whatnot, but the zoning code is really the nuts and bolts of like what are you actually going to do. And the biggest issue that I see in a lot of communities is they can't get out of their own way. go a little too hard on the zoning. They make things a little too difficult to develop. And they say, I want all these things, but the zoning code doesn't allow it, and then you end up with none of the things you wanted. So that's something that we need to really think about when we go through that process. Then also, as you think about your neighborhood and your neighbors in the future and how long you're going to be in a spot, we have to acknowledge that change is going to happen. And, there's this kind of a not in my backyard sort of a thing where it's like, I want a walkable community, and I want dense housing, and I want all these things, but I also want my neighborhood to be one house for every 2 acres, sort of a thing. And if we're in town, you're in the city, you have to reevaluate that a little bit, and frankly, we're gonna have to let parts of that go. If you want a dense, walkable community with more missing middle housing, that's what they call like the duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, you got to get okay with that being in your neighborhood. And so as the city, we can set, again, I said earlier, that substrate, we can make it possible to do these things through land use and planning and zoning, but it's going to take private individuals to take the risk. So you have to look at your backyard and say, I've got room for a garage, I'm going to put an apartment on top of it, and I'm going to rent it out to someone who works here, not make the extra couple bucks to just seasonally churn it on Airbnb. So that's I guess going to be the big ask from the city as we move forward. As we try to be progressive about setting the stage, we really need the business community, private individuals, to look at those opportunities and invest in your community and take those risks, because we don't build housing. The city doesn't build housing. We don't manage housing, but we work with you, the public, to make it possible to build it.
Great. Not that we want to stop there, because we've got other thorny things. So let's say a few words about childcare, and it's your time now.
All right, great. So I guess I feel underqualified to talk about childcare. Child-free, and I don't really feel that pain in my daily life. But
that's okay. We'll get to Kathy.
Yeah. But as an employer, it's a challenge. If we have people who can't get adequate childcare, they'll either move or not work. Sometimes it's a better deal to just stay home. And we've had employees leave for that reason. And earlier this year, we tried to, actually late last year, we had an event for city staff, and we tried to set up childcare to go with that, and we couldn't do it. So it's obviously it's a really big struggle, and the city doesn't have a whole lot of, influence in that space, but we're really, happy and helpful to be a partner if we can make it easier for other folks.
I guess it's Brad if we're going around the circle.
So childcare is the number 2 issue that our members are talking about, that are one of the biggest obstacles that they're having in finding and keeping workers. I know at the chamber, we're dealing with that with some of our employees, and their availability and hours they can work, days they can work, things they could do, because the availability of childcare. It also impacts the rates that we're having and needing to pay. Because if you're asking someone to come in and work and do things, well, it has to be factored in, well, my childcare is going to cost X, so for me, do we make it worth it to go work? I need this level. I think everyone is seeing that as one of the additional factors that's raised all of our pay rates up here, but it's really, as pay rates go up, it's, well, you're not gaining that much, because it's really all your other costs, and everything else has gone up as well. But it's encouraging, though. There are some good discussions and people who are trying to find ways that we can try to solve this issue, and what can be done to update regulations to allow people to come in. So we do need creative ways to look at this, and some of the old restrictions. And Alaska is such a big, broad, diverse state. You can't have one policy that really rolls down and works statewide. So I hope through some of the discussions and a lot of efforts and the surveys that are going out there, that we can get some good input and find out what can we do to try to break some of the barriers down and find some creative solutions. So it is being worked on, and I'm hoping before too long some creative solutions can come about.
Great, and Catherine, you're on the hot seat.
Yeah, childcare is definitely an issue for me and all of my friends. So I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, so I've been dealing with childcare issues for about 8 years. You have two big problems with it, availability and cost. There aren't many spots, if any at all. I always say that when I first found out that I was pregnant with my first child, the first call I made was to get my kid on a childcare wait list. Because I knew that that was going to be so hard. And I was right. It's about a year out before you can get your kid in, especially for an infant. You know, it gets easier as they get older, but babies are really, really hard. So in home, you know, I lived in Fairbanks, worked at the hospital there for a long time, and they had an in-hospital daycare, which is amazing. And I wish that South Peninsula Hospital, I'm looking right at you, would have that, yeah. Because it's amazing, and I know that it's expensive, but this daycare was subsidized for the workers. It allowed people to even work night shifts, so it actually at one time was 24-hour care, which is incredible, especially for night shift workers or certified nurse midwives who are up at night often. And it was mixed in with the long-term care. So you had elderly with the kids, and obviously during COVID that is not possible, but at other times there's a lot of studies that show all of the benefits to both the children and the elderly. So that's just a plug for basically the hospital to have some sort of daycare, which would be a huge undertaking, but it's also hugely needed. So that's kind of a private solution to honestly, it's a public problem. I always say, you know, I truly think it takes a village to raise children. I think that we all have some sort of social responsibility to raise the next generation because they'll eventually be paying our Social Security, you know? We need kids. So you know, the cost is the second problem. So you don't become a child care provider to become a millionaire. You just, even if it cost, you know, at one point I was spending about $2,500 a month on childcare. And it's like, I know that person is not making a lot of money, you know? They're paying their people about $15 an hour sometimes. So I think that we need more government, that's where like the public input comes in. I think we need more government help. And there are childcare subsidies for people who make a certain amount or whatnot. But I would love to be able to pay our childcare workers more. I think we would get more childcare workers. I think then we would have more daycares. And that's not even addressing the after-school problem. I mean, this problem goes on and on and on because, you know, we lost our Boys and Girls Club years ago now. I don't even remember how long ago. But that was a huge loss to this community. So how do we get that back? Because, you know, as a working parent, what are you supposed to do with your kid after school? You can send them to sports and whatnot, but it's just, you know, you have to leave your job in the middle of it to drive them to that sport and whatnot. So we need more solutions, and it really is going to take community input and pressure on our legislators and whatnot to help with this problem, because unfortunately, or fortunately, it takes money, you know, and we need government help with this, along with some private input.
Yeah. Okay, well, this is the last but not least area in our discussion for the second question, and that is transportation. So I think who's next? It should be... No, not, you don't want to go. Okay, Rob, go ahead. I lost count.
Right, so transportation is another thing we're actively working on at the city. So there's a good chance some of you have been to, we've had maybe 2 or 3 public engagement events in the last couple months related to a master transportation plan that we're working on. I don't know if she's still here in the room, but if Julie Engebretson is around, she's a good person to catch and ask questions about any future events. But we're really looking at it from, you know, you have like your classic transportation, you know, vehicles need to get places. People need to drive from their house to work. Big trucks need to drive from wherever they came from, wherever they need to go. But we also want, like I said earlier, you know, a walkable community. We want nice pedestrian scale, you know, landscapes and things like that. So how do we match those together while maintaining the practical part of there's only so many roads through Homer, and you know, big trucks gotta go places too. And Then the other thing that we're spending a lot of time on, if you listen to the radio, to council meetings, non-motorized transportation, sidewalks in particular, just so hot right now. Everyone's super excited about that. We just built our big Main Street sidewalk that was completed just a couple months ago. We're looking at expanding, out at Van Walters and some other places. So we're really, as we worry about, housing and some of these other things, we are also looking at the road networks that connect us, trail networks that are maybe not road adjacent, that connect neighborhoods, and putting a lot of effort into planning and frankly a lot of dollars into building and implementing too.
Great, and that's a really good overview of what the city is doing. Brad, what about potentially transportation with workforce?
It's, as we were going through some of the discussions on workforce, how do you create some solutions on that? Well, once we even, got some projects in place, well, a lot of those workers are coming here without transportation. They're dependent on, some form of public transportation to it. So that is a factor that they're trying to build into the project just outside of town so they can bring some of those workers in, but that's the only way. We don't have any other alternatives. So that is a solution they're looking at how they can create. But here in town, up through this past summer, we always also had a shuttle that would go around town. We had the little trolley that would go and help move people around town if they didn't have a vehicle, if they flew in. That was one way they could move around. But because that really didn't generate enough revenue as a private enterprise to make it work, that was sold, and all those buses are, I believe, in Valdez or going to Valdez. So we're going into a summer season next year with probably not having a public form of transportation like that. So that's going to put more pressure on our car rental side, on our taxis, and everything else in the area. So I'm glad that there are some discussions and workshops on finding solutions, but it's going to be a growing problem here if we don't find some affordable solutions to that.
Catherine, any comments?
Yeah, transportation is definitely not my area of expertise, but I do have opinions about it.
That's what this kind of conversation is all about. So you're right on schedule.
So, yes, I mean, one of the big changes, I guess I always talk about to my friends or my husband is about how East End, we live out East End now, and I feel like East End Road has turned into a highway. In the morning commute, the afternoon commute, it's like, wow, the East End Road is getting crazy. And so it would be great to find alternatives to having just single-person cars going out there, personal cars. I think public transportation would be amazing. I mean, the fact that Girdwood can have some sort of shuttle constantly that is free to the public, that's amazing. I mean, Girdwood's small, and I get that it's part of the municipality, and so they have more money, but it would be wonderful to have something even seasonally in Homer to help transport workers, help anybody. And then non-motorized, I mean, sidewalks would be great, especially along Ketchum Drive. It is, we're all, especially coming from East End to the Spit, which we're doing, many times a day in the summer. It would be great to have a safer alternative to being able to bike or walk, whatever it is, because I think it's a really dangerous road. And same with out East End, past the Oceanside Farms or where the bike path ends. It would be amazing to have a bike path that went even just a little further. Because the other problem is there's no parking where the bike path begins or ends out East End. So those are not necessarily City of Homer issues, all of them, but I think it definitely affects a lot of people who live or who work in the city.
Thanks. And yes, in fact, I think we all feel like we are part of the community of Homer, whether we're inside the border or not. But I also would like to give a attaboy to Nine Star because, and I don't know if Franny's still here, but she and quite a number of people have set up a task force that is really reaching out to a number of areas having to do with transportation in the peninsula and also connecting Homer with Soldotna Kenai more frequently and stuff. So there is work being had. So it's not always just we're pie in the sky. It's really great to see this group working and really moving forward in a lot of ways. So keep your ears posted. One of the last questions that would be good to talk about is that there is a social issue to growth. And we have been successful with bringing the retired community here to Homer. We now need to look at attracting a younger aged workforce and ways to encourage our high school graduates to stay here. So the question is, what type of social climate is needed to support the interests of the young adult population? Catherine. You're young. And you came back.
I did come back, yes. So I grew up in Homer, and I graduated from Homer High in 2007, and then I left for a while, over a decade, and came back just before the pandemic. I came back to Homer because of the community. I mean, the natural beauty is amazing, and of course, much appreciated, but the community of Homer has always been, to me, the biggest draw, and I knew that I wanted to raise my kids here because of that. I think that overall, though, in order to draw, more young people, we really need to invest in our kids. I can't emphasize that enough. And I do come from a place where I work with women and children every day, as a midwife up at the hospital. And so that is the lens that I see everything through. But I just don't think we invest in them enough. We leave moms and babies by themselves in this community often. Like, they don't have a lot of support. People move up here from the lower 48. They don't know a lot of people. I think we do a good job at rallying around people if we know about the problem. But what I would love to see is to see the state, the health system, basically invest in a nurse-family partnership, which basically provides a nurse for every mom, starting at 20 weeks and going all the way. And the nurse visits the mom and the baby every 2 weeks until the kid is 2 years old. So Anchorage already does that. I think it would be great to see in the more rural areas, but so stuff like that. I think also investing in schools, it's always a fight for education funding, which also not my area of expertise, other than the fact that I send a kid to the public schools here. I think overall we're really lucky with all of our school choices. But my sister is a 4th grade teacher, and I hear the struggles every day about the sometimes larger class sizes and the, lack of pay, lack of benefits at times. And I think that it just comes back to our social quilt and what we have to invest in each other in order to keep this community up. So I would love to see us continue to support schools, and then of course, childcare.
Which is kids. Brad.
One of our freedom in the chamber is one of our best solutions to some of the workforce issues we're having is if we can tap into some of these high school students and find opportunities, connect them to the openings before they head out and don't come back for 10 years. So I'm really proud of what I see happening at the college and the Homer Marine Trades Association, trying to put together programs and go into the high school and expose them to some of the welding jobs and different things that can happen in the marine side. And that's one factor of it. But I know there's so many other trades that are here, positions being unfilled, and they're willing to pay outrageous amounts of money to try to fill those positions, but they just can't find people to do those. And some of the jobs aren't that sexy. So if you're coming out of high school, everything is probably being drilled. You need to go into high tech and you need to do all these app development and type of jobs. But boy, we need electricians, plumbers, contractors. Marine trade is going to be growing, and the needs there is going to continue to expand as we expand the port and all the jobs that come with that. So there's huge opportunities if we can make those connections. One of the things we've been talking about the chamber is what about creating a junior chamber of commerce, something that is focused on kind of those younger people and show them how to start a job, what does it take to get a job up and going. Getting them mentored with people who can, work with them on getting some of the skills and make those connections. So if we can do a better job of keeping our young people in town and start some jobs, because there's some great livings that they can have, and staying here, raise your family, and help our economy as a whole, if we can work with them early on.
Thanks. Rob?
Sure. Excuse me. So I feel like the panel's done a good job covering quite a bit of it. So I think I might focus a little more on, I guess, this idea of retention. So there's the whole thing about, having people move to town or getting young people to come back, but like, what do you do, like, once you actually caught them, right? It's like, okay, great, they're here. And it gets back to all these questions we had earlier. Okay, so do they have a place to live? Is that like a reasonable place to live? Can they stay there all year? Maybe we've hooked them with an entry-level job. Do they have any opportunities in town to grow their career, or do they have to leave? That's one of my biggest concerns with some of my staff is, there's a very narrow professional pathline for folks, and there might not be an opportunity for a decade or something for a certain job to open up. So how do we, as employers, as people here, find ways to continue to keep people engaged, job craft, kind of work the edges of things to make things engaging and interesting so that we, once we get that talent, we can retain it. And then I guess on the other side, Karin started this as a social thing. People have to be able to make friends and stuff. It's one thing to get here and move here and it's beautiful and whatnot, but if we're not like a welcoming community to newcomers, and I'm not talking about like Minnesota nice, like, smile and wave and do but like actually like making friends, inviting people, doing the whole thing, people are gonna, they're gonna do their time and they're gonna go. And oddly demographically somehow, like I'm a young person here. I'm in my 40s, but I'm an elder millennial, and it's always dangerous to out yourself as a millennial, but I'm one of the old ones, the wise ones. I can use a rotary phone. But we've got some weird age gaps here where it's really hard to break in. I've lived here 2.5 years, and I've had just a hell of a time making friends. I don't have kids, I'm not in schools, I'm not, whatever. And a pandemic did not help at all, yeah. So, and you have to imagine there's a lot of other folks living the same exact thing, and we don't have a lot of nightlife, we don't, it's like people have their boats or they do their outdoor stuff, but we don't have a lot of stuff in town for people to just hang out that doesn't involve, drinking. So those are challenges everywhere, and it's the same thing, when you're talking about like teenagers or whatnot. Where can teenagers hang out and, not drink and do stuff? It works for grown-ups too. So, so I guess that's my view on it. Don't just think about the recruitment, think about the retention. How do you make, Homer or your community, wherever you are in the Kenai Peninsula, attractive to actually stay in the long run by making a socially rich life for folks?
I think that's very important. I have a background of having moved over my lifetime often because of being in a military family. And if we're really bearing our souls, there is a lot of people that say that our community is very welcoming, and they really are. But there is a little bit of that Minnesota smile, which I had never heard of that before, because and I hate to say this, but churches are that way too. Oh, come down, or nonprofits, come on down. And then when you say, I'm here, I'm new, and they say, but we've already got this done, and we're doing it this way, and we're doing that way. And I think that what I'm hearing through all of this is that growth and change is here, and that we have to accept the fact that things are different. I'm even whirling my head because I just came back from a month down in the lower 48, and they're different there. So I think that hopefully we have shown an opportunity that we are interested in having this discussion. This is an important community discussion. I hope and I would think that all of you from other communities have in fact seen the same issues and the same discussion. And being very forthright, I appreciate all of you saying things that are very forthright. And that's the only way we're going to move the dime. And so it is important to include all of you in this conversation. So I would say if anybody has something they would like to add to our conversation right now, we have some time. Please stand up, wave your hand, jump up and down. Anybody, please come forward. You don't have to come up front, just participate. Is there anybody in here that's willing to? Okay, and Jan, if you don't mind standing up or at least yelling loud, I'd appreciate it if you would give your name, what community you're from, and also possibly your position.
Sure. I'm Janet Newsom. I'm the director of the Chamber Visitor Center and Membership Liaison. One of the things that's been so successful in this community is the Shorebird Festival. It's been going on for over 32 years. We're on a major migration path that attracts Alaskans, locals, and everybody else. From that, there has the PED celebration, 26 PED farms here. We're getting people from Alaska who don't know that we have that many PED farms, and they're very, very excited to come here. Pioneer Avenue has walks and gardens with the businesses, which are really attractive to tourists. And then the Arts Festival. That is attracting a whole bunch of people, locally and also visitors in the fall, combined with the festival at the movie theater. One of the things we're lacking, and I think weaving in, are the arts and the outdoor activities that we are, again, can be so rich in. We're thankful to have the Internet Theater, but what about a performing arts center? This is something that people at all levels, kids, adults, seniors, so really need to think about how the arts really tie us together at any and all ages. And I don't know if there are any discussions. I know there have been some about a performing arts center, but let's look at that as well. We're rich in the arts. The galleries. We're #1 in arts, just like fishing and deer hunting and everything. So, but where are the venues that are going to attract more people and more involvement?
Thank you. Anyone else on any of the subjects that we've talked about? You can even talk about childcare and housing. Ron?
Robert,
Name, thanks, yeah.
Robert, financial advisor, business owner, and Alaska Small Business Development Center advisor in that team. Brad, question to you. You mentioned something about a mini commerce for the youth, presuming that the high schoolers and so on. I love that idea. And I'm wondering if you've created any inroads further than just the idea.
It started with the discussion of making that connectivity from the high school side, and also, how do we help those people start new businesses? So it was just it was a thought that came about from early discussion, and then we went on our break. So I can certainly see where an opportunity is for something like that here, but it's certainly something we need to flush out a little bit more and see how to make that happen. But I would love some input from folks who might want to be a part of that and how we can kind of help mentor some of the young people in those efforts. But yeah, the small business advisory center would be a key part of the roles that you and the tools that group has in helping to start a business and helping connect those pieces together. That would be a great start.
Good, I think we have a volunteer. Anyone else? I've got 3 people, and we will start with Reed Joe.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm Rita Schultz, and today I'm known as a community person. And in the past, I was known as a developer. Didn't like it, and a lot of that. We talk about growth and some of the things that we need. I think that the people that are building, going new businesses, part of your business plan must be housing, childcare, transportation. And I think the folks that are making the loans and the folks that are helping with the business plans are all responsible for making sure that that's part of their business plans. We must take responsibilities.
Thank you. Yes. Caroline.
My name is Caroline. I serve on the council, but also I have a job in college. And I want to acknowledge that our director is here today. But my dream is for us to be a college town in the way that we draw people here that want to pursue education, but perhaps more outdoor environmental education. We have the semester by the bay. Now we offer it in the fall and the spring. Wonderful program. And some of those students stay working for the islands and oceans of fish and wildlife in this town because they love our community. But what I need to have people do, I hope, is to talk to our board and visit with Reed and other people who work at the college to give them a sense of direction. What would you like offered? And if you have a master's degree, to offer yourself as a teacher, as an adjunct. Just to build this community up, I think the college would be a great opportunity. The more educated we are as a community, the more opportunities we offer to everyone. So in my dream would be to involve the college in almost every decision that we make. And I want to thank Rob, Brad, and
Kat.
thank you for coming to it. It's very interesting. Thank you.
Was that Franny?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You next.
So I just was at a rotary and Jeffrey was kind of filling me in. He said that you guys had talked a little bit about the transit project that KPEDD supports for us taking the survey. And so
Yeah, please give a little more because I was looking for you, but you were gone, and I didn't give much details. I just said, yay on us. You know.
Yes. So the transit project is an entire Kenai Peninsula project. And it stemmed from a group of folks who got together here in Homer and said, hey, why don't we have public transportation here? And for me, I work with NISTAR and we do education and employment for youth 16 to 24. And most, so not most, but a good chunk of my youth don't have vehicles and can't really get access to jobs. And we've got youth that we serve from Clam Gulch all the way to across the bay. And so if you've got somebody who lives in Anchor Point and needs to get a job, they got to take a cab. Or I even had this summer, I had youth who were working down at the spit at Land's End, and to take a cab to the spit at Land's End was $16. The starting wage for housekeepers is $14.50. So you're spending more than 2 hours of your employment on just getting to and from work. So through that, we kind of came up with a conversation with Joanna with ILC, Bradley Parsons, who's with ILC, and with the city. Tim Dillon has been a huge part of this conversation. Jeffrey, Rick, I believe Rob, or who's Brad, has been in our meetings. Yeah, we've had quite a few people, cars in our meetings. And a lot of it comes down to, we want to get public transportation, but the Department of Transportation funds for rural transportation has to be subsidized. So we don't really have cities here per se or towns, we have a borough. And so for us to look at subsidizing through the borough, we got to do the whole Kenai Peninsula. But it's actually really positive because we're the second fastest growing borough, 56,000 people currently right now, and it's probably going to grow, in the next 20 years. So how do we make sure that people can get to work? How do we make sure that businesses stay employed? How do we make sure that people are not isolated and can get health care appointments or get to addiction services or just get to socializations? A lot of places in the Kenai Peninsula have, a lot of agencies will have their own transportation system. They don't have buses or gas that they purchase. But even then, it's pretty limited and the cost of that is really expensive. So right now, there's 3 transit systems on the Kenai Peninsula. There's the bus bus, which is run through the Nilchik. They run 3 days a week, on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and they're very limited in the services. So if I've got a youth who lives in the Nilchik and needs to come to work in Homer, the bus bus gets here at 9:45. They pick up in Homer and go back up north at 3:15. That's not even a full day. And it's only 3 days. You have the card service, which only serves the central area peninsula, and they have an on-demand service. Like, why am I paying a bunch of The Canisies are currently in the process of putting in a transit system. They're building their bus barn right now. And so we've got transit agencies who are kind of picking this up in one on-demand service. So what can we do as a community and as communities to look at transit systems? And so the idea of the survey is to get information from consumers and our communities and everybody, whether you use public transportation or not. Okay, cool, let's take this back to the money people, right? Our legislators, the Department of Transportation, say, this is what consumers are saying. So let's go to the boroughs, this is what your consumers are saying. We need to put something into place. So that's kind of the idea of the transit system. That was really a lot of really condensed short time, probably not as much information as I could give. So I don't know if anybody has questions about that.
But they can find you at Night Star.
Yes, and you can find it at Night Star. We are located to the next to the old subway location. Subway has since moved. So we're in the Pioneer Building. Please come find us. You can call me, email me. Just if you want more information, you want surveys. We have paper surveys. We have an online survey. We have a QR code with flyers. And KPEDD has been the person who's put this all together. They're hosting the survey. They've been a huge partner in really looking at this. So if you want any information or just want to know how you can be a part of the conversation or how you get information out there, please come see me.
Great. One very quick, because I know that Cassidy is looking at her watch. And I'm not sure who you are.
Hi, Karen, I talked to you on the phone.
Oh.
Cynthia West.
Oh, yes, I'm glad you identified yourself.
I'm with Public Health, Pharmacology and Equitable Communities Unit. We are solely grant funded, which is a really fun way to work. I come from what is called DPA Public Systems. And we are tackling a number of projects, including child care. I hope with the current job there on March 3rd to have state licensing folks and federal licensing determined. So if anyone has questions, would like more information about how to get licensed, how to run a small business, we might let you know on that as well. But open business, we talked a lot about resources, grant funding that's available right now. And we're also looking to the future when all this grant funding stops. And there's going to be kind of a cliff for our child care providers here in town with no funding. So a way to continue to support them, possibly with partnerships with businesses. That's as short as I can go.
And I want to thank you. Yes, I'm excited about many things. If you know me, you know I get excited. But I am very excited about the fact that it's grassroots. I think that, both with childcare and with transportation and hopefully with housing, means that you really will get some consensus and you will push the right people, whether they're elected or our staff, to do certain things because we need these changes. And I am excited that you are really starting to understand, at least in the community of Homer, how important it is to partner up with KPEDD. I think we as a community have underused that connection, and I'm excited that we are now really on top of that. So I want to thank the panelists. I want to thank the audience that was willing to stand up and speak. I want to thank the audience that was willing to listen. And we are going to continue these conversations in all our communities. So thank you very much.